showtime.
Oni is a title that I don't know if I could easily recommend to most people, but I think there's value to be found in this positively ancient action game. When we talk about action games, it's mainly focused around Japanese developers like Platinum Games and Team Ninja. But play through Oni and you'll see many of the nuances associated with this style of game manifest at a time and place that have me constantly double checking to see when and where this came out. For all its age and the plentiful signs of its troubled development, it provides a fascinating look at the road not traveled for Bungie, and in a few key areas, has some valuable lessons for the genre going forward. So, as a baseline, Oni is a hybrid shooter/melee action game, with the real focus being on the melee combat. You're mainly fighting one or two opponents at once, so instead of relying on overwhelming odds, enemies pose a more substantial threat, feeling more like sparring partners out of a fighting game than cannon fodder meant to make you look cool. And despite its exhaustive list of moves, encounters tend to be more a question of positioning and punishment, going for your high damage grabs and getting in as much damage as possible when the enemy is down. This can sound pretty utilitarian, and to a degree it is, as I'll discuss later, but there are a lot of nuances here that add some appreciated depth to the combat. You can skip the animation for picking up items by sliding or rolling, intensely valuable during the more chaotic fights. Medkits serve a cool dual purpose, healing you but also allowing you to enter an overcharged state where you'll hit harder and take far less damage. This allows for a nice instant progression as you initially focus on hoarding them for survival before being flush with them and able to activate your super form as needed, with some parts of the game suddenly clicking into place when you start throwing caution to the wind and embrace this new power. Seriously, everything made so much more sense when I followed Nick H's advice from his excellent video on the game.
Do not make my mistake and use hypos only for healing. The difficulty is balanced around overcharging, and you will have that much harder of a time if you don't activate it, especially during the later levels. Enemies and friendly NPCs give out hypo sprays much more than ammo drops, which I thought was weird at first, but now that I know the game wants you to use them, it makes a lot more sense.
And what was maybe the most surprising to me when I started Oni, your grabs and throws have an active hitbox. This means that in stark contrast to the more prescriptive combat of many Western action games, go for a lariat and you can connect with adjacent enemies, your moves having an appreciated degree of intentionality behind them. It's a subtle addition that adds a great deal to the combat, further pushing you to dive into encounters for the invincibility and crowd control these moves provide. And it also serves as a nice translation of the mentality of 2D beat-em-ups, where enemies are as much weapons as they are threats, though this can cut both ways.
That hurt!
The developers on Oni list Tekken 3 as one of their main influences, and between that and the amount of work that went into the canned multiplayer mode, I think it at least partially explains why so much of the game seems so purposeful. Scrutinize these mechanics in the context of an assumed multiplayer environment, and it's no wonder the AI seems so unusually adept, or why the game has such strong fundamentals. In many ways, it seems like the team at Bungie West ended up creating a game with the same competitive discipline as later developers like Itsuno and Itagaki, whose action titles drew from their fighting game experience. That might explain why Oni seems so prescient in terms of design, predating even the genre-defining Devil May Cry by over half a year. That said, for all the good here, it's a little too easy to fall back on some of the same few habits, performing lariats and backbreakers through a combination of their sheer efficiency and a lack of inputs on the part of the player. It's one of the harder points of the game to reconcile, so many of the moves offering a cool range of utility, but whether or not they actually come out feels decidedly murky, the trigger for initiating a throw often being hard to gauge. Sometimes you'll move towards an enemy and vainly whack them in the face, and other times, it just works. To draw from the recent Matthew Matosis video, this is the point where the combat system hinges too much on context sensitivity, automating a substantial portion of the action and robbing it of the sense that your successes are wholly your own. As he notes,
any kind of accomplishment can only fully belong to the player if they're the one with exclusive control over their avatar. The more the burden of control is shared, the less responsible the player is for the outcome.
This is one of the few places where the game feels really incomplete, the other being the lack of any kind of scoring system to serve as more motivation to vary up your approach to combat. Those moments where you just snipe enemies or go for the same few moves again and again, born partially out of the limitations of the controls, but also because there's little incentive to explore the full range of your moveset. Knowing that finishing off one guard with an energy rifle and the next with a melee combo was a way of boosting your score could have assuaged some of the nagging concerns that can creep in while playing now. I suppose I mention it because as the game progresses, it becomes easier and easier to circumvent the action entirely thanks to powerful weapons like the taser and grenade launcher. Hard not to feel like something has gone horribly wrong with an action game when you're able to finish so many of the fights, sometimes against characters positioned to be Konoko's rival, in the unhypest way possible. And I admit, this is me trying to retrofit a staple of action gaming onto a title that didn't come with those preconceived notions. One of the most invaluable things about Oni is that you get to see an action game blend a few different genres and design philosophies together. For as much as I've discussed the combat on its own, it's also a game with NPCs that fight alongside you, and a stealth mechanic that can see you avoiding fights altogether. It's hard to even say if a scoring system would really be compatible with some of its more systemic, chaotic elements. This could make it an especially interesting playthrough for someone trying to broaden their vision of what an action game should include, though I still think it's missing some additional layer to really tie everything here together. I also don't want to totally disregard the gunplay itself. When it intersects with the melee combat, especially in the early to mid-game, there's a unique thrill in fighting over a weapon, a kind of action movie struggle that I can't think of many other games replicating. Certainly humbling to see enemies utilize the same tricks that you can to skip the pickup animation and have them blindside you in the middle of a fight, but it's a nice bit of dynamism. Any stray weapon suddenly becomes a potential vector of attack, a compelling interaction that both adds to the considerations of combat and makes the action feel that much more grounded, allies and enemies alike having just as much agency in the world as you. Another upshot is that the weapons here are an exceptionally strange bunch, and likely as a result of the planned multiplayer mode, are designed more as a way of complementing the melee combat instead of overriding it. 3 weapons, the pistol, submachine gun, and sniper rifle, are hit scan, but the rest are projectiles, physical objects that you can potentially avoid. While the latter half of the game becomes too focused on gunplay that isn't robust enough to warrant such a strong pivot, the principles here are sound, where being under fire is exhilarating instead of frustrating. Add to this the frequent use of a Dune-style shield that can absorb ranged attacks and only manages this balance of gunplay and melee combat with a lot more grace than you might initially expect. I don't know if I could say the same of the world at large, though. The truth of editing together a video like this is it means I've cut all the boring parts where you're lost in one of the game's many anonymous corridors. Terrible to say, but one of the benefits of having such a visually barren game is that it means the camera going straight through the environment and peering out into the void isn't some immersion-shattering flaw, but actually the game's most praiseworthy inclusion. While maybe jarring to see in a video, in gameplay this is a tremendous feature, the action always readable, terrain never obscuring your vision of fights, and the camera itself always staying at the same distance from the player, as it doesn't have to wrestle for position in the game world. Especially for a community that puts so much stock into player control, it feels like an especially welcome change. Never fighting the game and the camera, just a one-to-one focus on the action. The other benefit of taking this approach to the camera is that it probably meant there was a greater freedom to design areas with a variety of architecture in mind. While you're mainly fighting in office buildings and industrial warehouses, there's an appreciable difference in the size of rooms and arenas. Fights can happen in staircases, cubicles, and tiny out-of-the-way rooms that would be unthinkable in titles sporting a more traditional camera. After thinking about it more, I wonder if the uniformity and homogeneity of many action game levels is owed to making sure the freeform camera is accommodated. So that's why you see the slow flattening of environments until all you get are anonymous arenas strung together. The future of action games turning into a series of hallways, parking lots.
Guess who's getting the wrath kicked?
While the environments in Oni aren't much better, you could generously describe them as grey box core, I think levels like the one where you're running alongside a sheer drop next to these monolithic structures show the potential this sort of camera could have. Combat still works well, even in these non-traditional confines, and the level adds some new hazards to consider when fighting enemies, thinking about spacing and how exposed you are to enemy fire in ways that you don't in the rest of the game. Again, it's the kind of level that would be fundamentally incompatible with a modern camera, and it was hard not to come away from my time with Oni wishing that this had become one of the more widely adopted approaches for making a camera in an action game. In an interview with MacNews.de, Bungie PR Doug Zartman described their unique approach to the camera, saying, "With most third-person games, there is this problem with the camera position, i.e. during an action scene, a player may lose his orientation, and then ends up not knowing what's going on. With Oni, we make every wall and every object between camera and player transparent, and it's working. We are only experimenting at this point, but we're sure that we've created a real first-person feeling in a third-person game. The fact that the camera holds up this well, better than titles coming out this year, is both a triumph and a little sad. One of the many cool ideas from this game that didn't seem to get built on in a sequel or a spiritual successor. Struggle with wrangling a camera in other action games before playing this, and it's easy to think that it's just a necessary frustration with a solution yet to be found. But afterwards it just feels like an archaic barrier, the problem solved over 20 years ago. Maybe it's because multiverses are all the rage right now, but it feels like Oni is the product of some alternate timeline, one where developer Bungie had set the foundation for 3D action games for years to come. instead of doing that instead for a generation of first-person shooters. While a far cry from the stylish action that would come to define the icons of the genre, you can feel some of those same sensibilities present here. In those moments where you wait for a guy to reload before disarming him and taking him down with his own weapon, or when you and an enemy taunt each other before going in for the final blow.
Come on!
Ready to lose?
Nuclear tackle!
It may be something of a curiosity, an artifact right now, but on a long enough timeline, maybe it can be acknowledged for the design trends it was hinting towards, and its best ideas can still be carried forward. Thanks for watching.